We begin tonight, of course, in the Wellington electorate that, despite name changes, boundary changes and changes of government, has remained loyal to one MP since 1984. Oharu, home to Peter Dunne since he was elected as a very young Labour MP in Rob Muldoon's snap election. Now, in a third shock departure in as many weeks, Peter Dunne has announced he will leave Parliament at the election. Why? He says he's been getting a clear message that voters are looking for change. It's one seat and he's one MP, but by helping him win it, National have had an extra vote in the House. For the Nats, Oharu has been a win-win. 18,000 party votes for them, plus an MP from another party who supports them. Now what? In a moment, Peter Dunne himself, but first, here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Oharu is an important seat in the broader political landscape, as for the past 3 terms it's given the National Party one extra vote to rely upon. That was the reason the National leader Bill English gave the signal to Oharu voters to vote for Mr Dunne as the electorate MP to help him win the seat. A One News Colmar Brunton poll released just over a week ago showed Labour's Greg O'Connor 14 points ahead of Mr Dunne, with 48% of the vote compared to Mr Dunne's 34%. Mr Dunne says it was becoming increasingly apparent the electorate was looking elsewhere.
We're in a very volatile and uncertain environment, and I was getting a strong sense from my electorate over recent weeks, once the changes in other party leaderships had occurred, that there was a mood for change that wasn't there with any great certainty as recently as a month ago. So it seemed to me that that was going to just change the landscape, and I felt that given that, and given a lot of the sort of feedback I was getting, it was probably time for me to stand aside so that they could choose a fresh electorate MP.
Mr Dunne says it was not an easy decision to make, given he's lived in the electorate for more than 40 years. Voters in Oharu were surprised to hear the news.
You've got someone that's got a lot of knowledge about the country, and then why did he resign?
He's always done well for his electorate and things like that. OK, well, time for change, isn't it?
It's pretty sudden, wasn't it? Right, yeah. I think it's time for change.
Big surprise. Thought, he's starting to lose, and all of a sudden he does a runner.
He's had a good go. It's going to turn out to be quite an interesting election.
It's not too bad a news, really, to be honest.
He's getting older too. He's not a young fella anymore. He's done a good time, and he's served the area very, very well too, so he's done his good bit there.
Pretty sad for the local area that he's resigned.
The Prime Minister Bill English paid tribute to Mr Dunne's time as a minister and as a support partner.
Peter has been an important part of strong and stable government over the last 9 years. We haven't always agreed, but he's always committed his support to confidence and supply so that the government can execute the very successful program that's made this into one of the better performing economies in the developed world.
Mr English says compared to the turmoil on the left, this is a straightforward change to deal with.
Well, it'll be a lot simpler than 2 big parties having to change all their billboards. It's one letter and one electorate. So no, not a circus. I mean, Peter Dunne's made an unexpected decision. Brett Hudson is a well-known candidate, well-known MP there, and he will be fighting hard to win that seat.
The Labour Party leader Jacinda Ardern has thanked Peter Dunne for his service to Parliament. She says there's no doubt Labour's candidate Greg O'Connor is doing well in the electorate and that the race just got very, very interesting.
We can't really determine how necessarily people who were planning to cast their vote for Peter Dunne will now cast their vote. So, as I say, I think this is an incredibly interesting race. Greg is working really hard, earning every single vote.
The Green Party leader James Shaw also paid tribute to Peter Dunne for his time as an MP, even if he voted against many of his party's initiatives. But he says Mr Dunne has realised the tide is turning and it's time for him to go.
I think he's probably also seen the polls that put him quite a long way back in Oharu and decided that actually, given that he's not going to be a minister in the next government, doesn't want to be in opposition, it's time to call it a day, and I respect him for that.
Earlier this year, the Greens decided not to stand a candidate in Oharu to give Greg O'Connor a better chance of winning. United Future will not stand anyone else in Oharu, which means it will effectively be a head-to-head battle between Mr O'Connor and the National candidate, the List MP Brett Hudson. For Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.